Good morning, everybody. All right, so here we're going to take a look at the road to the apocalypse, where we take a look at the roadmap, discuss things that are coming up and what are already in the game, and then speculate and talk about what we want to see. This always brings out some really good discussion. So I'm on their website, heading the roadmap, and my son is joining me today. I don't have a secondary mic set up to where we can both talk. It doesn't let us both talk. He'd have to like put his. He's like, but I'll just hook this other thing. Well, one overrides the other, and then I don't want him putting his face right on my mouth so he can talk. So we'll have to. Anyway, but he's excited. Okay, so opening up the world, we've talked about building varieties and some props and world objects, which leaves us right now with ponds, lakes, rivers. So let's see what they've got. So water is a massive system we plan to add to the dead Linger, ranging from ponds to wide open seas. There will be hundreds of new things to see out in the open water, and many more things to discover on the next shore. Rivers will run through the towns and mountains, generally leading you to civilization, or at least the coast. Water can be used to cleanse your infection risk in the form of diving into water or simply washing off under a faucet, assuming water still lingers in the pipes. The ability to swim will also arrive with this feature.
Infected fish.
First thing my son says is the infected fish. That's true. They already have the infected dogs, and then they've got, the uninfected buck. So as you add the water systems, and we've talked about the ability and need to fish, I could see where that would be a risk. Either I would think you don't necessarily need zombie fish that attack you like piranha. Maybe, go swimming, you chance it. But I could see a more realistic system where you're catching the fish, and as you catch and pull the fish out of the water and you go to prepare it, there might be a way to check if it's infected, so don't eat it. So you might have to catch lots of fish to find enough that are not infected to safely eat.
Mutated eel.
Mutated eel.
Which
So
is actually an entity that will attack.
So my son's thinking, okay, so he's already coming up with things that we want to see in the water. I think water is a big thing that a lot of us have been waiting for, if not in the form necessarily of ponds and streams and lakes, at least from that sense of immersion where not only do I have to find and collect food, but I need to find and collect and drink water to survive as well. But we've talked quite a bit about water before in previous episodes where we've talked about transportation. We've mentioned boats. So this will actually be a huge change to the game.
There was also a fact that you have to basically boil the water before you drink it.
Okay, it takes my son a long time to spit a thought out, but he says one thing would be to boil water. So let's talk about water survival. So let's just say initially all they introduced is bottled water, for instance. If you want to talk about infection, if it's just bottled water, I would have to think that all water would not be infected initially because you have no way to purify it. But what would be cool, and possibly you could do this, they have frying pans. I've seen the frying pans. I've gone in some houses and they have frying pans. So if you made this complicated system where you could take that bottled water, which may or may not be infected, pour it into the frying pan, and then stick that on your fire to boil it off. Now, when you take 7 days to die, for instance, they have where you can click on the fire and you can take different items like empty jars, pour water into the jar, but there's ways that you can boil water and purify the water.
Because basically if you get water into a clear glass, it's murky water, which takes away your health and stamina.
Okay, so my son says you take the murky water, put it in the jar, boil it on the fire, pull it out of the fire, and then you have clear water, which is safe to drink.
But there's one side effect. You have to have a cooking item like grill or a crock pot.
Okay, so he said you have to have a cooking item, which would make sense because we have that in the Deadlinger. They already have the cooking pan. So purifying water could be a great, I almost want to call that a mini game because you got to find all the components, But that just leads into, a robust crafting system that they've talked about. So we have to take different items, combine it together to make safe water. Now that's just talking about bottled water. Usually bottled water is pretty safe to start with. Where I would really need to see need to purify water is after they add in their ponds, lakes, and rivers.
I was thinking that you don't have to use an actual fire. Maybe they should add car batteries, which allows you to take car batteries, make it into this compact system, hook it to a oven or something,
Oh, okay.
and then boil the water.
So my son is a real MacGyver. So he was saying, hey, what you could do is if you didn't have a fire, is take a car battery, gather up enough material, and then hook that car battery to a stove, and then power the stove to boil your water. So, which isn't too far fetched because we have talked about in the past where they want to come up with alternate power sources. And we have our trusty flashlight now where you use up the battery and then it comes back. Well, you certainly could come up with alternative power sources to power a thing like an oven. Because when we play 7 Days to Die, as far as I know, the fridges and the ovens work.
Everything has power.
Yeah, it's like everything's powered, so the power grid's still good. But you have an opportunity in something like the Dead Linger where the power grid goes down. And like I've said before, what would be fun is if you had where you could specify when the power grid goes down. Because initially, when the zombie apocalypse happens, things will still be running because they're set up that way. And then at some point, when there's not human interaction, that's when you start getting explosions and world collapses, and then you lose power. But that might take time. So at some point, those ovens won't work until you attach those alternate power supplies. And what does that have to do with ponds, lakes, and rivers? It all goes back to that. How are you going to purify potentially harmful water that you could use to then lower your own infection? All right, he's got another thought.
Gave me a great idea. Basically, if you could find generators and find fuel, if they do add broken down cars, you could take away the leftover fuel, pour it into the generator, start it, and it'll start running a house.
So his mind has already gone away from ponds, lakes, and rivers. He said, hey, siphon the fuel from a car, put that into the generator, and then the generator could power the house.
And
And?
boil the water.
Oh, and then boil the water. So the thing that I like about the Dead Linger so far is there's just so much potential where they could take their realism and their immersion into the world. I mean, they've already mentioned things like cars and things like that and having to siphon fuel. It wouldn't be that much more, well, it's easy for me to say because I don't program, but how much more exciting would that be to put a system like that, like a generator? You run the generator, it powers your home for a bit to where you could, use like that stove to boil water. And, that's mostly what we've been focusing on with the water so far has just been boiling it, make it safe. But when we talk about water, though, there's a lot of important things that come with the water. So not only would they need to introduce, I would think, a thirst meter, tracking how much water we drink, storing the water, finding water, what kind of things will they have. I think initially it probably would be bottles of water until they give us ways to interact with the water to collect it up in things like cups and pots and pans and other storage devices. Yeah.
By saying that you could have to find stuff in the water or something? Infected guppies or baby fish.
Okay, he mentioned
eggs.
infected guppies, yeah. So there's lots of things that you could see potentially run across in the water. But there's something else that water brings that's important. That's a way of transportation as well. Also a way of safety. I would think that, once you have the water system, you'd have to come up with a way of swimming. And I think they mentioned that, the swimming too. What would be fun, I would think, is I don't think boats are coming initially. I think boats will be down the road after the water's put in place. But that's something we've talked about before. How cool would that be to have like a houseboat? And they've mentioned yachts and different things like that. So even if it's a small boat, that potentially is a great way to travel large distances in a quick amount of time. I think bridges would be important too because, if you're not able to swim or it's huge, but Bridges would be nice to cross those expanses of water. Just my mind starts thinking about all the cool things that will come with the ponds and lakes and rivers and stuff like that. But the ultimate thing would be cool is if you could find out in the middle of one of these lakes a small island that you could claim as your own. Okay, what?
That being said, I was thinking about armor or weapons for water, like diving suits. And
Uh,
then you have to have the spear to protect yourself from the infected fish and stuff.
oh,
And
okay.
mutated eel.
So more items he thought of would be, spear guns, diving suits. So when you start bringing in ponds and lakes, that brings out more equipment that you could put for your character. And I think that would be cool if you could get like your diving suit and the diving mask and oxygen tanks and actually spend time underwater. I don't know if I would want to if the zombies wander in and fall into the water. So that was my first thought is how are the zombies going to react to the water? Are they just going to stop? I've seen movies where they just walk on into the water and then at some point they walk along the bottom because they don't have to breathe. They just slowly move through the world and then they come out the other side. So how safe would your island be from zombies? So even though you're out on the island, if they can climb up, it's hard to say what the landscape looks like under your island. But I'm just excited because the idea of these ponds, lakes, and rivers just adds so much to the world. And I don't really see that in a lot of other zombie games. Well, no, I take it back. They have rivers in the infestation stories. They have some rivers that you can swim across. Although I haven't seen a whole lot of interactivity with that. I have not tried to I don't play that game so much, so I've not tried to get water from it and then purify and boil water and stuff like that. I haven't tried. 7 Days to Die does have lakes, so you can gather water up. One thing I thought was cool we did in 7 Days to Die was they had a water tower and my son busted open and all this water come pouring out and it never stopped. So it was like this unlimited supply of water that was coming out of the water tower.
Also, way before they added the murky water that you had to boil, we just picked it up and drank.
Yeah, and so they had water, and I know I've played on Breaking Point, which is an Arma 3 mod. I don't remember so much like rivers, but they're on an island, and so when you hit the edges of the island, then you've got the ocean there, and you can gather up water if you have something to store water. You can fill up like cans with water. Some of the Daisy standalone, let's see, like Daisy standalone, I've seen where they've got the edges of their island too, but I don't know if they have rivers and lakes running through the island that you interact with. But so all of these other games have to an extent water. So I just think that would be a next great thing to add to the game. That way you could really, I'm not quite sure. I'm just trying to think how I would use that for traveling now without a boat, because you wouldn't. Swimming would be some cool animations to add. So it's good thoughts. Mostly I'm just excited for where we have to start tracking water in addition to food and then to see what they add to it. Anyway, just some random thoughts and some ramblings there on ponds, lakes, and rivers. We're excited to see it. I think my son has one more thought. What?
If they're gonna have to add seas and stuff, they have to add mutated sharks and regular sharks and infected sharks.
Oh, he wants to see mutated sharks
And regular
and
sharks.
regular sharks.
And
But
then the infected, which isn't quite mutated.
oh, so he wants to see infected sharks, regular sharks, and mutated sharks.
Yeah, basically like two-headed sharks.
Oh, he wants to see a
Infected is,
two-headed shark.
Zombified.
Okay, so infected would be zombified, then mutated we'll see some two-headed sharks,
Or
and then
something.
just some normal sharks.
Random.
Randomly mutated, stuck together shark
Yeah.
parts. Maybe it's got a tail coming out its forehead.
Two tails in the back.
Two tails in the back.
Extra speed.
For extra speed, yeah. So he's excited too. His imagination probably runs a little more wild than mine. So anyway, yeah, so ponds, lakes, and rivers. If you're excited, share some thoughts. What would you like to see with the ponds, lakes, and rivers? What excites you about the idea of having that in the game? you know, and then because it's the weekend, if you have any other thoughts that you want to share about things to come, as you can see, we have a few more things to talk about starting next week: random encounters, day-night cycles, foliage. Haven't really talked about the grass that much. So if you have any thoughts, share them, and then we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.